Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the video. Now, it's been 2 weeks. It's been 2 weeks since my test drive. I did a bunch of stuff to the rear suspension last weekend, and I took some video and I did some editing of that so that I could show you what I did. And I'm gonna show that to you right now while I put some gas in here. If in my last video, I finally did a test drive with the Bug with the EcoTech, and it went really well. That was last weekend. What I'm doing this weekend is, well, I didn't have a lot of time to work on it during the week because I had to do some traveling for work. But now the last couple of days I've been working on it, and I want to go over and show you what I've been doing to it since the test drive. The front end had a bit of a shimmy in it. Just as you're going down the street, the steering wheel bucks back and forth, back and forth. So one subscriber recommended that instead of having it towed in a little bit, which I had, to tow it out a little bit. So I did do that. I took the front wheels back apart, just like I did in the previous video, and instead of giving it 1/16 of an inch of tow in, I gave it 1/16 of an inch of tow out, so I can see how it is next time I drive it. Now in the rear here, I'm doing a couple of different things. First thing I'm doing is I'm setting the toe on the rear. If you watched some of my other videos, I made my rear lower control arm with Heims, one on each end, so that I can actually adjust the spindle in or out to adjust my toe in or toe out. The main reason that I did that is because this is really the first Baja Bug that I'm building, and especially because it's got a little bit more dramatic suspension than normal. I wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to run the rear with some toe in, some toe out, or neutral. So I set it up this way so that I've got the options to be able to adjust it accordingly. Once the Bug is up and running and I have all this sorted out, if I ever make a different set of control arms, I'll probably make those with bushings and not Heims, because at that point I'll know where I want it to be, and then I'll just design that into the swing arms. So just like in the front, I clamped on a 4-foot level that I'm going to use to take measurements, and then on my chassis, this piece here runs from about back here, and then from here it runs about 2 more feet further forward, and this is what kind of ties in the engine mounts to the chassis and a couple of other things. And those are straight pieces for the most part. There's 2 of them. They run parallel with each other. When I welded them in there, I was really careful to keep them parallel, and they're, I would say, parallel within probably less than a 1/16. So I'm considering that a decent measuring point to set the toe on here. So now that I've got this on here, I'm going to take a measurement from here to that piece of steel and from here to that piece of steel, and then I'm just going to make it parallel with that piece of steel by setting the Heims. Then another thing I did, and I don't know why it took me this long to do this, I drilled a little hole into this. This is like a strengthening piece that the shock absorber bolts to, and then it welded onto the swing arm here. I drilled a hole through here so that I can put a shackle through here, so that I can put a strap on here, so that I can stop the shock absorber from extending, so that I can jack it up and do work on it without it having to go into full droop. Because when this goes into full droop, it hangs down pretty far, and like the U-joints are maxed out, and it's pretty intense. So a lot of times when I'm working on it, I don't want it on full droop. So what I was doing before is I would take this strap and wrap it around this, and it was all kind of dicey. So I drilled a hole through there so I can just put that in there, clamp it off, and it's good to go. Then another thing I did is my bushings for this rear control arm were really loud when the suspension would move. Not only did they creak and crack if the suspension traveled quite a bit, it would really make a loud, like a crack noise as it was moving. And I thought that might be a problem because when I welded these, there was quite a bit of weld that actually ended up being underneath some of that bushing. I didn't know how much of a problem it would be, when I was actually doing the welds and putting it all together. But I think that caused this portion of the bushing to have so much pressure on it that it didn't want to move in here. And so when it did have to finally move, it really made a loud noise, and it was hard to identify if that was just the bushing or if there was actually something going wrong back here. So I unbolted this and the other bushing. I pulled the control arm out some. I took the bushings out, and with the flapper wheel on my grinder, I ground all these welds that are right next to the bushings here. I did it on all four sides here. I ground them really smooth, and then when I bolted all this back together, and it's much smoother, and I'm hoping that that will make it just do the little, I mean, when these move, there's a little bit of a crunch or a squeaking as they're moving. I'm okay with that. I'm just hoping that this does away with that loud cracking. And then one more thing I'm going to do. On my upper arm here, this is what controls my camber. There's a collar that goes through here that this bolts onto. There's a 1/4-inch plate tack welded on here. There's nothing tacked on the backside. A lot of when I built this chassis, I just tacked these things on so that if I needed to take them apart later on or whatever, it wouldn't be too much trouble. Well, now I'm at the point where I'm driving it, and as I'm horsing around with this a little bit on the gravel roads, some of the things like this worry me a little bit that they're not strong enough for horsing around. My original plan is when I take this all apart for paint, I'll solid weld all that stuff. But really, since I want to kind of be able to beat on it a little bit and tune the suspension and stuff like that before I tear it apart for paint, I want to be able to drive it kind of hard. So as I have this all apart, I'm going to pop this out and I'm going to weld it back here, because that'll give it a lot more strength this way. Right now it's just tacked here and a little bit on the top, but I'm going to weld this collar on to this tube here back there for a lot more strength. Now, aside from what I did last weekend, yesterday I balanced the front tires, because if you remember in the test drive, one of the most concerning things for me was the shimmy that the steering wheel had as you'd be going down the road. One of the subscribers recommended, instead of a little bit of toe in, I give it a little bit of toe out, that might help with that. So I did do that. I took the toe in out, and I gave it a little bit, like a 1/16, which is probably a degree or two of toe out. But more importantly, I think, is I balanced the front tires. These wheels are the wide 5s, and I brought it to actually I brought it to Discount Tire. They tried to put it on their machine and they couldn't, because they didn't have the adapter for the wide 5. Then I called a couple of local tire places. Nobody could help me out with that, so I took a motorcycle tire balancer that I have, and I just extended it a little bit, and I took some of my, actually, I'll just take you in the basement and show you. So after realizing that none of the local shops were going to be able to balance my wide 5, I took this is my motorcycle tire balancer. I modified it a little bit for the Baja wheels. What it came with was this little plate, which would actually bolt on right here, and then these two wheels were down here, but that wasn't big enough for the front tire to be able to rotate through there. So I just made this is a 3-inch extension that just brings the roller wheels higher up here. So then this would work for the balancing, and then I took I took one of my empty disc brake hubs, because that had the wide 5 bolt pattern on it, and I took this is a 1/2-inch threaded rod, which is the inside diameter of the tapered cone that this balancer comes with. You're supposed to take a motorcycle tire. This is the 1/2-inch shaft that came with this kit. You mount it on there, you take these cone adapters and they slid on this shaft, and you would push them into the motorcycle wheel. When you would push them in, because they were tapered, they would center it, and then they had set screws that you would tighten it down, and then it would stand the motorcycle tire, and then you would balance it. Well, what I did to get the empty to fit is I put the bearings in there, and then I could still use these tapered cones to find center on the bearings, so that worked fine. But I couldn't just use the set screw to put pressure on there, because with all of this weight and the weight of the tire, just having the set screw wasn't enough to draw it in. So I took 1/2-inch threaded rod, which is the inside diameter of this cone, because this is a 1/2-inch rod. I took 1/2-inch threaded rod, and then this is a larger diameter aluminum sleeve that has a 1/2-inch inside diameter. I put that over the threaded rod, and then it's got nuts on either side. So when I then tighten down the nuts, it pushes pressure on these cones, and then it centered the wheel. And that's how I was able to center this. And then I would just bolt the wheel onto I would bolt the Baja wheel onto this wide 5, and then I would, use that to find center. It's not exactly the way that I wanted to do it, but it was the best that I could come up with, because I couldn't find any local shops that would do it. So now that I have a little bit of toe out and the front wheels balanced, at least as much as I can balance them, and I've done that work to the rear suspension, now I want to do another test drive and see if the shimmy's gone, and if the shimmy is gone, I can do a little bit more running around on those gravel roads and test a couple more things out now that I've got more confidence in the rear suspension. Alright, so I'm good to go for my test drive. A couple things I'm going to do on this test drive. I don't have any tools or anything like that on this test drive. I think the reason why is I'm trying to make sure that the rear suspension isn't making any noises that I thought it was making last time. And the noise I thought it was making last time might have been the tools and all the stuff I had bouncing around under the seat. So I'm just going to do a little test drive here, take it down the gravel road I went down last time that was making the noise, and see how it does. when it hits the aluminum on the paneling, woo! It's loud. I can't stress to you, when you touch the turning brakes, this thing just really comes right around. I would have never anticipated that much reaction from the steering brake. And I like it because it really makes it, if you, at least on gravel, give it a little turning brake, whoop, comes right around. It doesn't make that noise. Turning brake here. Yeah, man, it comes right around. It's nuts. Alright. We're gonna do a little highway run here. It's a good test drive. The shimmy is gone, all but gone. That most likely was the out of balance tires, which is great. It's still very loose, which is fine. I haven't really done any tuning on the suspension yet. Basically, everything's really good. Acceleration's good, braking's good, clutch is good, steering's pretty good, steering brakes are good. There is a clunk in the back, clanking around. That's the number one thing that I need to identify when I get back home, is what's making that clunk noise. And I'll look into that. I'm going to do a little stint down this gravel road, see if it makes more of that clunking. So that's it for the test drive. It went really good. The steering is solved. That problem is fixed. It's very stable. It doesn't even pull from one side to the other too much. It does a little bit, but not bad. But the shake back and forth is gone. I did tow it out a little bit, so that may or may not be helping to cure the problem. But in thinking about it, having it be out of balance, I figured, as the heavy end's going from one side to the other, it would have a tendency to pull back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Like if this tire was out of balance, like it was, as the heavy end came around, because it's all being supported off of the spindle this way, as the heavy end goes this way, it would have a tendency to pull the tire this way, which would push the tire that way. Then as the heavy end came back around this way, it would have a tendency to pull the tire this way, which would have the effect of pushing it that way. So as the tire was going round and round and round, it would be, the heavy end would push that way, push that way, push that way, push that way. It's doing the same thing as it goes this way. As it's at the top here, it's pulling up, and as it's at the bottom, it's pulling down. But with the way that this suspension is, you're not really going to feel the pull that way and that way. That won't affect the steering. But when it's over here, pulling that way and then pulling that way, so it'd be a back and forth motion on the steering, that's when you would feel the back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So anyways, guys, that's the update from after the initial test drive. This was a good test drive because I solved a lot of issues from the first test drive. Oh, also that loud crunching that was coming from the rear suspension, that's gone also. So cleaning up the welds on that rear swing arm took care of that. So all in all, it was a really good test drive, really good. So thanks for watching the video, guys. I hope it's helping you out, and I hope to see you on the next one. Take care.